The rain fell in sheets across the cemetery grounds, turning the freshly dug earth into thick mud that clung to expensive shoes and designer heels. Chen stood at the edge of her Aunt Patricia's grave, one hand pressed against her 8-month pregnant belly, the other clutching a black umbrella that did little against the sideways wind. Her husband Marcus stood beside her, but the distance between them felt like an ocean despite the mere inches that separated their bodies. Aunt Patricia had been more than family to Sarah. After her parents died in a car accident when she was 12, Patricia had been the one to take her in, to raise her, to teach her that strength came from within and that love was something you earned through actions, not words. Now Patricia was gone, claimed by cancer at 63, and Sarah felt like she was losing her mother all over again. The priest's words blurred together as Sarah stared at the mahogany casket being lowered into the ground. She barely registered the soft Latin prayers, the murmured condolences from the handful of attendees who'd braved the storm. Patricia had lived quietly, preferring privacy over social prominence, and her funeral reflected that same understated elegance. Sarah felt a contraction ripple across her abdomen, not painful yet, but uncomfortable enough to make her shift her weight. The baby, their daughter, kicked against her ribs as if sensing her mother's distress. Sarah placed her hand over the movement, finding comfort in the small life growing inside her even as she said goodbye to the woman who'd taught her how to live. Marcus checked his phone for the third time in 10 minutes. Sarah noticed from the corner of her eye, saw the slight smirk that crossed his face as he typed something quickly before pocketing the device. Her chest tightened with a familiar ache that had nothing to do with pregnancy and everything to do with the slow dissolution of her marriage. When the service ended and mourners began dispersing to their cars, Sarah remained at the graveside. The workers had started filling in the earth, and she couldn't bear to leave Patricia alone just yet. Marcus touched her elbow, his grip firm but devoid of warmth. "Sarah, we need to go," he said. His voice carried the clipped impatience she'd grown accustomed to over the past year. "I have a meeting in 2 hours." "5 more minutes," she whispered, not taking her eyes off the grave. "Please." She heard him sigh, that particular exhale of frustration that told her she was being unreasonable again, needy again, too emotional again. But he didn't move away, and for a moment Sarah allowed herself to hope that maybe the man she'd married 4 years ago was still in there somewhere, buried beneath the coldness and the distance. The hope died when she heard feminine laughter behind them. Sarah turned to see Vanessa Park emerging from a black Tesla, her designer coat perfectly coordinated with her stiletto boots, her dark hair styled in waves that looked effortless but probably cost more than Sarah's monthly grocery budget. Vanessa was Marcus's business partner, or at least that's what Sarah had been told. Looking at her now, at the way Marcus's entire posture changed when he saw her, shoulders straightening, expression brightening, Sarah knew that business partner was a laughably inadequate description. "Marcus," Vanessa called out, waving as she picked her way across the muddy grass with surprising grace. "I've been waiting in the car for 20 minutes. The investors are getting antsy." Sarah stared at her husband. "You brought her?" "To my aunt's funeral." Marcus had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, but only slightly. Vanessa drove separately. "We have a Henderson meeting this afternoon. I told you about it last week. You told me you'd be here for me today." Sarah's voice cracked despite her best efforts to remain composed. "You promised. And I am here." Marcus gestured around the cemetery as if his physical presence was some kind of gift. "But Sarah, life doesn't stop because someone dies. Patricia wouldn't want you wallowing in grief when there's work to be done." The casual dismissal of her loss, the use of Patricia's name as if he'd known her, as if he had any right to speak for what she would have wanted, it ignited something in Sarah that had been smoldering for months. "Patricia wanted me to be happy," Sarah said quietly. "She wanted me to be with someone who actually loved me." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Don't start this now. We're in public." "Then when, Marcus? When do we talk about the fact that you can barely stand to be in the same room with me? When do we acknowledge that you look at Vanessa the way you used to look at me?" Vanessa had reached them now, close enough to hear Sarah's words. To her credit, She had the decency to look away, though Sarah caught something in her expression that might have been satisfaction. "Sarah, you're being dramatic," Marcus said, his voice low and controlled. "Pregnancy hormones are making you emotional. We'll discuss this at home." "No." The word came out stronger than Sarah expected. "No, we'll discuss it now. Are you having an affair with her?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Sarah saw it in the way Marcus's eyes slid away from hers, in the way Vanessa shifted her weight uncomfortably, in the way the rain suddenly seemed louder against her umbrella. "I want a divorce," Marcus said finally. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, even though some part of her had been expecting them for months. Still, hearing them spoken aloud, here at Patricia's graveside, with her aunt barely in the ground, the cruelty took her breath away. "What?" Marcus reached into his coat and pulled out a manila envelope. Sarah recognized it immediately as the kind lawyers used for official documents. He'd been carrying it with him all morning, she realized with growing horror. He'd come to her aunt's funeral with divorce papers in his pocket. "I've been waiting for the right time to tell you," he said, his tone maddeningly reasonable. "Obviously there's never a perfect moment for this conversation, but I think we both know this marriage isn't working." Sarah's hands began to shake. "I'm 8 months pregnant with your daughter." "I know. And I'll provide for the baby financially. My lawyers have already drawn up a very generous custody arrangement." Marcus held out the envelope. "But Sarah, let's be honest. We stopped being happy a long time ago." "You stopped being happy," Sarah corrected, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I'm still trying to make this work. That's the problem." Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice as if he was explaining something to a child. "You're trying too hard. You've become clingy and desperate. It's suffocating. Vanessa and I connect on a different level. She understands my ambitions, my goals. She doesn't just want to play house and have babies." Each word was a carefully placed knife, designed to cut deep and leave scars. Sarah felt tears mixing with the rain on her face, but she refused to break down completely. "Not here. Not in front of them. I loved you," she whispered. "I know you did. And maybe I loved you too, once." Marcus pressed the envelope into her hands. "But love isn't enough, Sarah. It never was." He turned to leave, Vanessa falling into step beside him. Sarah watched them walk away together, Marcus's hand finding the small of Vanessa's back in a gesture so familiar it made Sarah's stomach turn. They'd probably been together for months, maybe longer. All those late nights at the office, all those business trips, all those times Marcus had come home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, the signs had been there. Sarah had just been too busy trying to save their marriage to see them. She stood alone at Patricia's grave, the envelope heavy in her hands, feeling the baby kick against her ribs. The rain continued its relentless assault, and Sarah realized with a distant sort of clarity that she had nowhere to go. Their apartment was in Marcus's name. Their car was registered to him. Even her phone was on his family plan. In the space of 5 minutes, Marcus had stripped away not just their marriage but her entire life. The cemetery groundskeeper approached carefully, an older man with kind eyes and a weathered face. "Ma'am? We need to finish here. Are you all right?" Sarah wanted to laugh at the absurdity of the question. Was she all right? She'd just buried the only family she had left and been served with divorce papers at the graveside by a husband who'd brought his mistress to the funeral. She was 8 months pregnant, financially dependent, and utterly alone. "No," she said honestly. "But I will be." She didn't know where the words came from, but speaking them aloud made them feel true. Sarah took one last look at Patricia's grave, at the fresh earth that would soon be covered with grass and flowers, at the simple headstone that read Patricia Eleanor Morrison, beloved aunt, brilliant mind, forever missed. Patricia had been brilliant, Sarah remembered. Brilliant in ways Sarah had never fully understood as a child. She'd worked in finance, something to do with investments in hedge funds that seemed impossibly complex to a grieving 12-year-old who just wanted her parents back. But Patricia had made it work, had built a life of quiet success while raising her niece with patience and love. Sarah's hand went to her coat pocket, feeling the shape of the key there. Patricia's attorney had given it to her 2 days ago, along with instructions to visit his office after the funeral. Something about Patricia's will, about assets that needed to be discussed. Sarah had been too overwhelmed with grief to pay much attention, assuming it would be Patricia's apartment and maybe a small savings account. Enough to help with the baby, hopefully, but nothing that would fundamentally change her circumstances. Now, standing in the rain with divorce papers in one hand and her future crumbling around her, Sarah thought about that key. About the appointment she had scheduled for tomorrow morning with Jonathan Reeves of Reeves and Associates. About the fact that Patricia had always been full of surprises. The groundskeeper was still waiting patiently, so Sarah forced herself to move. She walked to her car, actually Marcus's car, which he generously allowed her to use for the funeral, and sat in the driver's seat with the engine running and the heat blasting. Her clothes were soaked through, and she was shivering despite the warmth. She opened the envelope Marcus had given her, spreading the divorce papers across the passenger seat. The language was cold and clinical, reducing 4 years of marriage to legal clauses about asset division and custody arrangements. Marcus was offering her a token amount in the settlement, $20,000, which sounded generous until Sarah realized it wouldn't even cover 3 months of rent in this city. The custody arrangement was worse. Every other weekend, supervised visits initially due to the mother's unstable emotional state. Sarah felt rage bubble up through her grief. Marcus was positioning her as an unfit mother before their daughter was even born, laying the groundwork to take their child away from her. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, "Hope you're not too upset about today. Marcus needs someone who can keep up with him. You'll understand someday." Vanessa had actually texted her. The audacity of it, the casual cruelty, made Sarah's hands clench around her phone. She wanted to throw it, to scream, to drive to Marcus's office and make a scene that would force him to see her pain. Instead, she took a deep breath and deleted the message. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing how deeply they'd hurt her. She wouldn't play the role of the hysterical, abandoned wife that Marcus was trying to write for her. Sarah drove to the small studio apartment that had been Patricia's home for the past 15 years. It was in an older building in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy but comfortable and safe. The key fit smoothly in the lock, and Sarah stepped into the quiet space that still smelled faintly of Patricia's favorite lavender tea. The apartment was exactly as Patricia had left it, books stacked neatly on shelves, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table, reading glasses folded beside it. Sarah sank onto the couch and finally let herself cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and hollow inside her chest. She cried for Patricia, for the loss of the woman who'd been mother and mentor and friend. She cried for her marriage, for the dreams that had died slowly over the past year. She cried for her daughter, who would be born into a broken home before she'd even taken her first breath. And she cried for herself, for the woman she'd become, small and careful and so desperate to be loved that she'd lost sight of her own worth. When the tears finally stopped, Sarah felt hollowed out but strangely clear-headed. She made herself tea in Patricia's kitchen, using Patricia's favorite mug, and sat at the small dining table to really read the divorce papers. Marcus was taking everything. The apartment they'd shared, the furniture they'd bought together, even the savings account Sarah had contributed to equally. His lawyers had been clever, documenting everything in his name, making it look like Sarah had been nothing more than a dependent housewife for the entirety of their marriage. It was a lie, of course. Sarah had worked full-time as a museum curator until 6 months ago when pregnancy complications had forced her to take leave. She'd paid half the rent, half the utilities, half of everything. But Marcus had been strategic, ensuring that none of the major assets were in her name. Sarah's phone rang. Her friend Emma's name flashed on the screen. "Sarah, oh my God, are you okay? I just heard about Marcus. That absolute bastard, how did you find out?" Sarah interrupted. "It's all over social media. Vanessa posted photos from some investor meeting with hashtags about new beginnings and power couples. People are putting two and two together. Sarah closed her eyes. Of course Vanessa would announce their relationship publicly before the divorce was even finalized. It was a calculated move, establishing their narrative before Sarah could tell her side of the story. "I'm fine," Sarah lied. "Or I will be." "Where are you?" "You shouldn't be alone right now." "I'm at Patricia's apartment." "Emma, I need to ask you something." "How bad is my situation legally?" Emma worked as a paralegal, and Sarah heard the sharp intake of breath that told her the answer wasn't good. "Without seeing the papers, I can't say for sure." "But Sarah, if Marcus has been planning this, if he's had lawyers preparing." "You need representation." "Good representation." "I can't afford good representation. Marcus froze our joint account this morning. I have about $300 in my personal checking." The silence on Emma's end spoke volumes. "There are legal aid services," Emma said finally. "I can make some calls, see who might take your case pro bono given your circumstances." After they hung up, Sarah sat in the gathering darkness of Patricia's apartment and thought about her options. She could fight Marcus in court with whatever lawyer would take her case for free, knowing she'd probably lose. She could accept his insulting settlement offer and try to build a life for herself and her daughter on $20,000. She could crawl to Marcus's parents, who'd never liked her anyway, and beg for their help. Or she could show up to that appointment tomorrow with Jonathan Reeves and find out what Patricia had left her. Sarah spent the night in Patricia's bed, surrounded by the comforting scent of lavender and old books. She slept fitfully, waking every few hours as the baby shifted and kicked. Each time she woke, reality crashed over her again: Marcus's betrayal, Vanessa's cruelty, the impossible situation she found herself in. By morning, she felt wrung out but determined. She showered using Patricia's soap, dressed in one of Patricia's blazers that actually fit over her pregnant belly, and arrived at the offices of Reeves and Associates 15 minutes early. The law firm occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise. The reception area was all glass and chrome, with abstract art on the walls and a receptionist who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Sarah felt distinctly out of place in her borrowed clothes and sensible flats. "I have an appointment with Mr. Reeves," she told the receptionist. "Sarah Chen." "Well, Sarah Chen Morrison." "Actually, I don't know what my name is anymore." The receptionist's professional smile wavered slightly. "Of course, Miss Chen. Mr. Reeves is expecting you. Let me show you to his office." Jonathan Reeves was nothing like Sarah expected. She'd pictured someone older, patrician, the kind of lawyer who wore 3-piece suits and intimidated people for a living. Instead, Reeves was probably in his early 50s, dressed casually in slacks and a sweater, with warm brown eyes and an easy smile that immediately put Sarah at ease. "Miss Chen," he said, standing to shake her hand. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Patricia was an extraordinary woman." "Thank you. I'm sorry I don't know much about your relationship with my aunt. She was always private about her business affairs." Reeves gestured for Sarah to sit in one of the comfortable leather chairs across from his desk. "Patricia and I worked together for over 30 years. She was one of my first clients when I started this firm, and she became a close friend over the years." He pulled out a thick folder and set it on the desk between them. "Before we begin," Reeves said gently, "I need to ask how you're doing. Patricia mentioned that you were pregnant, and I can only imagine this has been a difficult time." Something about his kindness, his genuine concern, made Sarah's eyes sting with fresh tears. "My husband served me with divorce papers yesterday. At the cemetery. Right after Patricia's funeral." Reeves's expression hardened. "I see." Patricia would have been furious. She never liked Marcus much, Sarah admitted. She said he was too focused on appearances, not enough on substance. "I should have listened to her. Patricia was an excellent judge of character." Reeves opened the folder. "Which brings me to why you're here. Sarah, your aunt left you everything. And when I say everything, I mean considerably more than you might expect. Sarah's heart began to beat faster. Her apartment? Some savings? Among other things, yes. But Sarah, your aunt was a very wealthy woman. She chose to live modestly, but she built a fortune over her lifetime through careful investments and brilliant financial strategy. Reeves slid a document across the desk. Sarah stared at the numbers, certain she was reading them wrong. This can't be right, she whispered. I assure you, it is. Patricia's estate is valued at $550 million. And as her sole heir, it all belongs to you. The world tilted. Sarah gripped the arms of her chair, feeling the room spin around her. $550 million. It was an incomprehensible number, more money than Sarah could conceptualize. But how? Patricia worked in finance, but I never knew she was successful. She lived in that tiny apartment, drove an old car, bought her clothes at thrift stores. Patricia was brilliant at what she did, Reeves explained. She started as a junior analyst at Morrison Capital, your family's firm, and over 30 years, she built one of the most successful investment portfolios in the country. She preferred to keep a low profile for privacy and security reasons. But Sarah, she was a legend in certain financial circles. Sarah's mind raced. Morrison Capital. She vaguely remembered her grandfather starting some kind of investment firm before she was born, but it had seemed like a small operation. Nothing that would generate the kind of wealth Reeves was describing. After your grandfather passed away, Reeves continued, Patricia took over Morrison Capital. She transformed it from a regional firm into a major player in hedge fund management. She was the one making the decisions, managing the portfolios, generating the returns. But she did it all quietly, letting others take the public credit while she focused on the work. Why didn't she tell me? Sarah felt a mix of emotions, gratitude, confusion, something like betrayal. Why let me struggle when she had all this money? Reeves's expression softened with understanding. Patricia wanted you to grow up understanding the value of work, of building your own life. She was planning to tell you everything on your 30th birthday next year. She'd set aside time to teach you about managing the wealth, about the responsibilities that came with it. She wanted you to be ready. But she died before she could. Yes. The cancer progressed faster than expected. Reeves paused. Sarah, your aunt loved you more than anything. Everything she built was for you. She has letters, dozens of them, explaining her investment philosophy, her hopes for what you'd do with the money, advice for navigating the world you're about to enter. Sarah thought about Patricia's funeral, about the small gathering of mourners. If her aunt had been worth $500 million, where were all the business associates, the investors, the people who'd worked with her? As if reading her mind, Reeves said, Patricia kept her personal and professional lives very separate. Her business contacts knew her as Patricia Morrison, CEO of Morrison Capital. Very few people connected her to Patricia Morrison, the quiet woman who raised her niece in a modest apartment. So what happens now? Sarah asked, still trying to process the magnitude of what she was learning. Reeves spent the next 2 hours walking Sarah through the details of her inheritance. There was Morrison Capital itself, the hedge fund that managed over $2 billion in assets. There were real estate holdings across 3 countries, office buildings, residential properties, even a vineyard in Napa. There were art collections, rare book holdings, investments in tech startups that had become household names. The liquid assets alone, Reeves explained, come to approximately $300 million. The rest is tied up in various investments in properties that generate substantial passive income. Sarah's head was spinning. I don't know anything about managing this kind of money. I don't even balance my checkbook properly. That's what I'm here for, Reeves assured her. Patricia set up a comprehensive management structure. There's a team of financial advisors, accountants, and attorneys who will handle the day-to-day operations. You'll have final say on major decisions, but you don't need to understand every detail immediately. He pulled out another document. However, there is one time-sensitive issue we need to address. Your divorce. Sarah had almost forgotten about Marcus in the shock of learning about her inheritance. Now reality came rushing back. Marcus doesn't know about any of this, she said slowly. No, and Patricia was very specific in her instructions about that. She wanted to make sure you were protected. Reeves opened a new folder. Patricia actually consulted with me several months ago about your marriage. She was concerned about Marcus's behavior, about how he treated you. She asked me to prepare documentation in case you ever needed to protect yourself financially. She knew, Sarah whispered. She knew Marcus was going to leave me. She suspected. And she wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of when it happened. Reeves's expression was kind but serious. Sarah, I need to ask you something important. Do you want to fight for this marriage, or do you want to end it cleanly and move forward with your life? Sarah thought about Marcus's cold eyes at the cemetery, about Vanessa's satisfied smirk, about the divorce papers that painted her as an unstable, dependent housewife. I want to end it, she said firmly. But I want him to understand what he's lost. Reeves smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Then we'll need to be strategic. California is a community property state, which means Marcus could theoretically claim half of any assets acquired during your marriage. But Patricia died yesterday. We were still married when she passed away. Exactly. Which is why we need to move quickly and carefully. Reeves pulled out his phone. I'm going to call our litigation team. We're going to file several motions this afternoon, a counterpetition for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct, an emergency motion to freeze all marital assets, and a request for full custody based on Marcus's unstable lifestyle and ongoing affair. Sarah felt something fierce and protective rising in her chest. He tried to make me look like an unfit mother in his filing. I know. We're going to flip that narrative entirely. Reeves was already typing on his computer. But Sarah, I need your permission to take an aggressive approach. This won't be quiet or dignified. We're going to make Marcus's affair very public, very expensive, and very damaging to his reputation. Sarah thought about Patricia, about her aunt's quiet strength and strategic brilliance. She thought about her daughter, who deserved better than a father who'd abandon her mother at a funeral. She thought about herself, about the woman she'd been trying so hard to be, small and accommodating and grateful for whatever scraps of affection Marcus threw her way. That woman was gone. Do it, Sarah said. All of it. Reeves made several calls while Sarah sat in his office, her hand resting on her belly as she felt her daughter moving. Within an hour, a team of attorneys had assembled in the conference room to discuss strategy. The key, Reeves explained to the group, is that Marcus filed for divorce believing Sarah has no resources. He's offering an insultingly low settlement and demanding primary custody because he assumes she can't fight back. We're going to destroy that assumption, said Margaret Chen, the head of the litigation department. I've already started pulling records on Marcus's company. There are some interesting financial irregularities that suggest he's been using marital assets to fund his affair. Another attorney, David Park, chimed in. And the custody claim is laughable. Abandoning your pregnant wife at her aunt's funeral to be with your mistress doesn't exactly scream stable parent figure. They worked through lunch, building a case that was part legal strategy and part surgical strike. By late afternoon, Sarah had signed dozens of documents and listened to enough legal terminology to make her head spin. One more thing, Reeves said as the meeting was wrapping up. Patricia left you a letter. She wanted you to read it after you'd learned about the inheritance. He handed Sarah a cream envelope with her name written in Patricia's elegant script. Sarah waited until she was alone in Reeves's office to open it. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've just learned that your eccentric aunt was actually quite wealthy. I imagine you're feeling overwhelmed, possibly angry that I didn't tell you sooner, definitely confused about what comes next. First, know that every decision I made was to protect you and prepare you. I watched my brother, your father, struggle with the weight of wealth. He died before he could teach you what I'm about to. Money is a tool, not an identity. It can provide security, opportunity, and the ability to help others. It can also corrupt, isolate, and destroy if you let it define you. I raised you without wealth so you'd understand its value. I wanted you to develop empathy, work ethic, and humility. You've done all that beautifully, Sarah. You've become a woman I'm proud to call my niece. Now you have a choice to make. You can use this inheritance to build a quiet, comfortable life for yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. But I hope you'll consider using it to build something bigger, a legacy that goes beyond money. Use it to support causes you believe in. Use it to create opportunities for others. Use it to show the world what a woman with resources and compassion can accomplish. And Sarah, if someone has hurt you, if someone has made you feel small or worthless or less than you are, use this inheritance to remind them of their mistake. Not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. You deserve to be valued. You deserve to be cherished. Anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve space in your life. I love you, my dear girl. I'm sorry I won't be there to see what you build, but I trust you completely. You have your father's kindness and your mother's strength. Combined with the resources I'm leaving you, there's nothing you can't accomplish. Be bold. Be brilliant. And never, ever let anyone diminish your light. All my love, Patricia. Sarah read the letter 3 times, crying harder each time. Patricia had known. She'd known about Marcus's cruelty, about Sarah's shrinking sense of self, about the way her niece had been making herself smaller to fit into a marriage that was slowly killing her spirit. By the time Sarah left Reeves and Associates that evening, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She stood on the sidewalk, one hand on her belly, feeling her daughter's strong kicks, and made a decision. She was done being small. Done being quiet. Done accepting less than she deserved. Chen wanted a divorce? He was going to get one. Just not the easy, advantageous divorce he'd planned. Sarah pulled out her phone and called Emma. "How would you like to help me wage war on my soon-to-be ex-husband?" she asked when her friend answered. Emma's delighted laugh was answer enough. The next morning, Marcus woke to find his bank accounts frozen, his credit cards declined, and a process server waiting outside his apartment with documents that made his blood run cold. Sarah's counterpetition for divorce didn't pull any punches. It detailed Marcus's affair with Vanessa, including dates, locations, and the financial evidence showing he'd been using their joint accounts to fund romantic getaways and expensive gifts for his mistress. It included testimony from Emma and other friends about Marcus's verbal and emotional abuse. It outlined a pattern of financial control designed to keep Sarah dependent and powerless. But most devastating was the forensic accounting that showed Marcus had been embezzling from his own company, Chen Digital Solutions, to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't actually afford. The sports car, the designer clothes, the luxury apartment, all funded through creative bookkeeping and misappropriated client funds. Marcus called Sarah's phone 17 times that morning. She let every call go to voicemail, listening to his messages evolve from confusion to anger to panic to desperate pleading. "Sarah, what the hell is going on? My accounts are frozen. I can't access anything. Call me back immediately. This is insane. You can't just freeze my money. That's illegal. I'm calling my lawyer. Sarah, please. We can work this out. I know I hurt you, but this is extreme. Just call me so we can talk." She deleted each message without responding. By afternoon, the story had broken in the local business press. Tech CEO Marcus Chen under investigation for financial fraud. Read the headline. The article was careful to stick to facts: the frozen accounts, the emergency audit of Chen Digital Solutions, the divorce filing that had exposed potential criminal activity. Vanessa called next, her voice shrill with anger. "What did you do? Marcus is being investigated because of you. You vindictive bitch." Sarah hung up and blocked the number. That evening, Sarah met with Chen, no relation to Marcus, despite the shared last name, at a restaurant downtown. The attorney had news. "We've uncovered something interesting," Margaret said over appetizers. "Marcus's company is leveraged to the hilt. He's been borrowing against future earnings to fund his lifestyle. If we push him into bankruptcy, which we can do by demanding immediate repayment of the marital assets he misappropriated, he'll lose everything. Will that impact my settlement? Sarah asked. Technically, yes. You can't get blood from a stone, as they say. But here's where it gets interesting. Margaret smiled. Marcus's main investor is the Yardley Group. They're threatening to pull their funding unless he can clean up this scandal quickly. So Marcus is desperate to settle the divorce quietly, get the investigation dropped, and salvage his reputation. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we offer him a deal. He signs over full custody of your daughter, agrees to a confidential settlement where he gets nothing, and in return, you don't press charges for the embezzlement or pursue the full extent of damages we could claim. Sarah considered this. The vindictive part of her wanted to watch Marcus lose everything, wanted to see him destroyed the way he tried to destroy her. But she thought about Patricia's letter, about using her resources wisely rather than just for revenge. He also has to sign a statement admitting to the affair and acknowledging that I was faithful, loving, and a good wife throughout our marriage, Sarah added. I want it on record that this divorce was entirely his fault. Margaret's smile widened. I can work with that. 2 days later, Sarah sat across from Marcus in a conference room at Reeves & Associates. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled suit, hair unwashed. Vanessa was conspicuously absent. Sarah, he said as soon as he saw her. Thank God. We need to talk about this misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Sarah interrupted calmly. You had an affair. You embezzled money from your company. You used our joint assets to fund your relationship with your mistress. These are facts, Marcus. Not misunderstandings. Marcus's lawyer, a nervous young man who kept glancing at the team of high-powered attorneys on Sarah's side, cleared his throat. My client is prepared to offer a revised settlement. We're not interested in your offer, Reeves said smoothly. We're here to present ours. He slid a document across the table. Marcus read it, his face going progressively paler. This is insane, he sputtered. You want full custody, zero settlement, and you want me to publicly admit to adultery? Sarah, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, Sarah replied. I'm offering you a way out of criminal prosecution and total financial ruin. Your company is about to fold. The Yardley Group is pulling their investment. And once the full extent of your embezzlement comes to light, you'll be facing criminal charges. Marcus started, but his lawyer put a hand on his arm. My client would like to review this offer privately, the lawyer said. Sarah stood. You have 24 hours. After that, we're filing criminal charges and pursuing every cent we're owed, which will force your company into bankruptcy and you into significant legal jeopardy. She walked out without looking back. Marcus signed the agreement 18 hours later. The divorce was finalized with unusual speed, partly because Marcus was desperate to resolve it, partly because Reeves & Associates had connections that could accelerate the process. Within 3 weeks, Sarah was legally single again, with full custody of her daughter and a signed statement from Marcus acknowledging his affair and misconduct. Vanessa, apparently, had disappeared from Marcus's life the moment his financial troubles became public. Sarah heard through Emma that she'd moved to New York and was already dating another tech entrepreneur. Sarah gave birth to her daughter, Aunt Patricia Chen, on a sunny morning in April. She labored in a private suite at the best hospital in the city, surrounded by a team of doctors and nurses who treated her like royalty, which, given her newly discovered wealth, she supposed she was. Emma was there, holding her hand through contractions and wiping her forehead with cool cloths. Reeves sent flowers, enormous arrangements that filled the room with the scent of roses and lilies. Margaret Chen sent a gift basket with organic baby clothes and a note that read Future CEO. Marcus was not there. Per their custody agreement, he would have supervised visitation rights once Elena was 6 months old, but Sarah suspected he wouldn't exercise them. He'd already started rebuilding his life and his company, and from what Emma reported, he was telling people the divorce had been amicable, a mutual decision to part ways. Sarah didn't bother correcting the narrative. She had more important things to focus on. Elena was perfect, tiny and pink with a surprising amount of dark hair and eyes that looked up at Sarah with such trust it made her chest ache. Holding her daughter for the first time, Sarah felt a fierce protectiveness unlike anything she'd ever experienced. "Your great Aunt Patricia would have loved you so much," Sarah whispered to the sleeping baby. "She made sure you'd never want for anything. Made sure your mother would be strong enough to protect you." In the weeks after Elena's birth, Sarah threw herself into learning about her inheritance. Reeves set up meetings with the Morrison Capital team, a group of brilliant financial advisors who'd worked with Patricia for years. They walked Sarah through the portfolio, explaining investment strategies and market positions with patience and respect. Sarah was surprised to discover she had a knack for it. The same analytical skills she'd used in her museum work, understanding patterns, recognizing value, seeing connections others missed, translated well to investment analysis. Patricia's letters helped too, filled with wisdom about risk management and long-term thinking. But Sarah wasn't content to just manage the wealth Patricia had built. She wanted to create something of her own. 6 months after Elena's birth, Sarah established the Morrison Foundation, a charitable organization focused on supporting single mothers and survivors of domestic abuse. She funded women's shelters, legal aid services, job training programs, and childcare assistance. The foundation's first major initiative was opening Morrison House, a residential facility where single mothers could live rent-free for up to 2 years while getting back on their feet. The house provided childcare, job training, counseling, and legal support, everything Sarah wished she'd had access to during those first terrifying weeks after Marcus left her. "You're changing lives," Emma said one afternoon as they toured Morrison House before its grand opening. "Do you have any idea how many women you're helping?" Sarah looked around at the bright, clean spaces that would soon be filled with mothers and children who needed hope as much as they needed housing. "I'm helping the woman I would have been if Patricia hadn't left me this inheritance. I'm making sure no one has to face what I faced alone." The foundation grew quickly, establishing programs in 6 cities within the first year. Sarah found herself on boards of directors, speaking at conferences, being interviewed by business magazines about her philanthropic approach. She hired a team of brilliant people who shared her vision, and together they built something that was genuinely making a difference. Marcus, meanwhile, had managed to rebuild Chen Digital Solutions into something marginally successful. He'd married Vanessa in a small ceremony. Sarah heard about it through mutual acquaintances, though rumors suggested the marriage was already troubled. He exercised his visitation rights with Elena exactly twice, both times showing up late and leaving early, clearly uncomfortable with the reality of fatherhood. After the second visit, he asked Sarah if they could revise the custody arrangement. "This isn't working," he said, unable to meet her eyes. "I'm not good at the dad thing. Maybe it's better if I just step back." Sarah had been expecting this. "You can terminate your parental rights if that's what you want. I won't ask for child support." Marcus looked relieved, then guilty. "Sarah, I know I was terrible to you. I know I hurt you in ways I can never take back. For what it's worth, I'm sorry." Sarah studied him, this man she'd loved so desperately, who'd destroyed her so casually. She felt nothing but a distant sort of pity. "I forgive you," she said, and meant it. "Not for your sake, but for mine. I won't carry anger toward you, Marcus. It's not worth my energy." He signed away his parental rights the following week. Elena would grow up never knowing her father, but she would be surrounded by love, Sarah's love, Emma's love, the love of the extended network of friends and chosen family Sarah had built. On Elena's first birthday, Sarah stood in the garden of the home she'd purchased, a beautiful house with room for Elena to grow and play, close enough to the city for work but with enough space for privacy. Friends and family filled the yard, celebrating with cake and laughter and an absurd number of presents. Reeves pulled Sarah aside at one point. "Patricia would be so proud of you. Everything you've built, the way you've used your inheritance, it's exactly what she hoped for." Sarah smiled, watching Elena smash cake into her delighted face while Emma took approximately 1,000 photos. "I think about her every day. About how she saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. About how she gave me the tools to build this life. You did the building, Reeves corrected gently. Patricia provided resources, but you chose what to create with them. That night, after the guests had left and Elena was asleep in her crib, Sarah stood in her office looking at the photo of Patricia she kept on her desk. It had been taken at Sarah's college graduation, both of them smiling, arms around each other, joy evident in their faces. I hope I'm making you proud, Sarah said softly to the photo. I hope you can see what I'm building with what you gave me. She thought about Marcus sometimes, wondered if he ever regretted his choices. She'd heard he and Vanessa had divorced after only a year, that his company had been acquired by a larger firm, that he was working as a mid-level executive somewhere. But mostly, she didn't think about him at all. Sarah had built something better than revenge. She'd built a life filled with purpose and love and the kind of success that came from helping others rather than stepping on them. She'd become the woman Patricia always knew she could be, strong, brilliant, compassionate, and absolutely unstoppable. Elena woke crying, and Sarah went to her daughter's room, lifting her from the crib and settling into the rocking chair Patricia had given her years ago. As she rocked and hummed, feeling Elena's small body relax against her chest, Sarah thought about the future. There was a Morrison Capital expansion to oversee, new foundation programs to launch, a speech at the United Nations about supporting single mothers globally. There were birthday parties and scraped knees and bedtime stories. There were friends to cherish and causes to support and a whole life to build. Marcus had thought he was divorcing a nobody, a dependent housewife with no resources and no options. Instead, he'd freed Sarah to become exactly who she was always meant to be. And that, Sarah thought as Elena's breathing deepened into sleep, was the best revenge of all, not needing it, not wanting it, because the life she'd built was so much better than anything she'd lost. She carried Elena back to the crib, tucked her in with the handmade blanket Patricia had started before she got sick and Emma had finished after her death. She stood watching her daughter sleep, this perfect small human who would grow up knowing her worth, surrounded by examples of strong women who'd refused to accept less than they deserved. Thank you, Aunt Patricia, Sarah whispered into the quiet room. For everything. And somewhere, she liked to think, Patricia was smiling.